don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the At Random podcast. This is part 2 of our investigation into the Malaysian Airways flight MH370. So if you need to get up to speed, should go back and listen to last week's episode to get the background. So as this is, a continuation.
Yep.
And usually, you listen to the first part first, but maybe you don't want to. It's up to you, I guess. But I would recommend it. Otherwise, you might be a bit lost. And that voice over there is Ali. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm okay.
You're okay? And no spiritual leader today. Andy is sick. So he sounded terrible, to be fair. He left a voice message for us this morning, just like, oh my God. You just hear his vocal cords and straining. So he's been deep-throating too many donkeys or something. Hope you're getting better, buddy. All right, should we just get into it then?
Yeah, let's go. I've been looking into some of it as well, so watching some videos, and it is fucking weird, this whole situation.
Yep. And last episode I said this could maybe be a 2 or a 3-parter. It's definitely going to be a 3-parter because this episode is dedicated now to the investigation, what the investigators actually looked into and found and what evidence they had to work with. And again, it's not going to be absolutely everything because there is so much. I mean, they investigated this for 4 or 5 years. So I don't have everything. So there's going to be some more, the bigger points, the more important points. And then the next episode after this is going to be the theories that other people have come up with, or because the thing is, not just conspiracies, but even within the investigation, because they had an international team looking into it, right? Mm-hmm. There's not really a consensus on what happened. Yeah. So even within the professionals that looked into it, they have different theories. Or one branch has multiple theories. It could have been this or this or this. Yeah. So we'll go into that on the next episode in part 3 next week.
Yes.
But without further ado, let's start the investigation. So we briefly touched on some parts of this last week, so I'm going to sort of skip over those things. So again, go back and listen to part 1. You'll have more context.
Yeah.
But let's go. To begin the investigation, we'll look at, first of all, like I said just before, it was an international effort.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is Malaysia, so the country, not the airline, the government, they assembled a joint investigation team, they called it, which consisted of specialists from Malaysia, China, the UK, USA, and France. That led that was
the initial investigation.
The actual initial investigation, yeah, because these were all experts from companies, which we'll mention a little bit later on, but they're aviation experts. So the Transport Safety Bureau in the US, the French version, Boeing themselves, and also the satellite company Inmarsat from the UK.
Okay.
They all were involved in it, along with the government bodies, in the initial investigations. They had to set up this task force, and it had to comply with the, what are they called? The International Civil Aviation Organization standards. So when there's an accident, there is actually an international standard on how, protocols that have to be followed.
Yeah.
So it had to be set up with that in mind. They set up 3 groups. So there was an airworthiness group, an operations group, and then a 3rd group called the Medical and Human Factors group.
Mm-hmm.
So they had specialists, even within those companies that specialize in certain things. Airworthiness group, they examined maintenance records for the aircraft. They went over any sort of structures and systems within the aircraft itself, like Boeing documents, because this was a Boeing plane.
So could that have to do with the panels and
or was there an electrical system that was known to have a bug or something that could cause this issue?
So not the actual plane itself, but more
Well, yeah, they didn't have the plane itself, so
but more as in
the actual model.
The model.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So instead of looking at, I don't know, someone has a BMW, instead of looking at their particular car, they go through BMW's documentation on the vehicle or whatever, and find any potential flaws or points that need addressing.
Yeah, so anything that might indicate of something potentially going wrong.
Exactly. Or how certain events could have happened. Because how do they work sort of systemically, I guess. The operations group, they reviewed they were supposed to review flight recorders. Obviously, they never found them, so they couldn't. But that's usually what they specialize in. They also specialize in just the operations of the company. So things like what sort of training and education do they give pilots?
Okay.
How's their accreditation system within their company? You know, are they promoting people too soon to fly a certain craft, so on and so forth. And also meteorology. So they also looked at, the weather, potential impacts. Was it unsafe to fly? It wasn't, as we established in episode 1.
Yeah. But could that group, for example, look into the other pilot, which was his last day of training, right?
Yeah, and they might find, maybe he wasn't ready, or whatever, and just more general changes as well for the company they could suggest from these findings. So maybe in the future they can avoid, God forbid, if this ever happened again, they could avoid that happening. And then last but not least was the medical and human factors team. So as the name implies, they look at things like psychological, into the pilots, into the crew on board, even the people on the plane as passengers. Yeah,
if something might have triggered something.
Yeah, if one of them was having marital issues or was hugely in debt or had,
That's actually a funny thing that you bring up. That this might go in a bit more into the conspiracy part of the episode. But about the pilot, because most of the people that knew him and talk about him said he was a good family man, and that because he had a big family, grandchildren, and all these things. But there were claims that he had an affair, that he had broken off that affair. I don't know if it was him or the girl. I think she was 20 years younger than him. They had broken off a month before, but the day before the flight, she had sent him a text.
Yeah, well, so that will probably come up definitely in next week, I think. Also, the medical and human factors team, they looked into pathological issues, so medical problems with any of the staff. Did they suffer from were they more susceptible to hypoxia, which we'll talk about a bit more later, but that's an oxygen starvation. Yeah, obviously when you're at that altitude, there can be issues with that, and just survival factors in general. So if they crashed and they were on the water, what chance do they have? Yeah. Let's face it, none. But
it depends completely on how their plane actually crashed.
Yeah, but you're also 3,000 kilometers offshore in the most dangerous ocean on the planet.
They wouldn't survive, but more in the sense they wouldn't have died directly in impact, which is also...
Not necessarily, yeah. True.
Because that's a lot of the theories, is that, the pilot flew and ran out of gas, and then it just plummeted down, and obviously at that speed, the impact would have been catastrophic. But continue, because there's
a lot to get through here. Yeah. So they were the 3 teams set up. On April 6th, 2014, so this was just before a month, the plane crashed on March 8th that year, so it was 28 days later, or 29 days later.
Why did it take so long for the investigation to start?
They'd already started before, but I guess when you have a team that large, you have to coordinate. It takes time. You have to assemble everyone together, brief people, do your preliminary structure, how you want to structure it and all of that. But so the Malaysian government announced that they set up 3 ministerial committees as well. So not just for the investigation. That was just one part. That was one committee. Those 3 groups were in the joint investigation team were actually part of one committee. They also set up a next of kin committee, so for the families to offer support and counseling and all of that, and obviously if they're ever found anything, they have a point of contact and all of that. And they also made a committee for overseeing Malaysian assets that were used in the search efforts. So making sure where's their money going, what are they pulling their weight, and so on. Criminal investigations were led by the Royal Malaysian Police, which is their equivalent of the FBI. And they were assisted by Interpol and other sort of associated law enforcement agencies like the FBI and the larger intelligence firms around the world. Because obviously, potentially, it could have been a terror attack. So they did background checks I think the FBI background checked every single person on the plane, passengers and everything. So did the Chinese government.
Yeah.
Didn't find anything.
No, they ruled that out.
Yeah, they ruled out terror. But there, like we said in part one, there were two Iranian citizens that were looking for asylum in Europe that traveled on stolen passports. And that was actually flagged by Interpol. They had those passports registered in their stolen documents database. So there was some criticism from the Malaysian government on their immigration officials about why they didn't stop those people. Even if in the end, like they assumed they were just asylum seekers.
Yeah.
Because they bought the cheapest flight to Europe from Thailand, actually. And it took them on that route, like via Malaysia.
To China.
And then on to Europe, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So that's bad luck for them.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, let's say if there was any suspicion that it would have been, like, let's say a terrorist organization hijacking the plane, no one came forward to claim it. Usually, like, for example, like ISIS is always the first one to put their hands up for anything. Like, we did it. It's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah, or Al-Qaeda or someone. Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't a terror attack.
Yeah.
But anyway, they worked together with those intelligence agencies to background check absolutely everybody. On March 17th, so this was a week and a half after the flight, the Australian government took charge of the search and rescue, as we talked about last week, because it was the preliminary, very early investigations determined that it was somewhere off the coast of Western Australia.
Mm-hmm. But they were Australian passengers on that flight as well, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I think there were at least 3, because I watched some interviews and I saw 2 families that talked that they had lost someone on that flight.
Yeah.
Which, shouldn't they have taken part of that straight away in the investigation, since they had citizens that disappeared on that flight?
The thing with the Joint Investigation Task Force that we spoke about just before, they're experts in the field. Like so I guess Australian government probably wasn't needed for that. You know, you have Boeing themselves coming in, the satellite company that makes the satellite technology that we're going to delve into very deeply in this episode, because it's the only link that they have. They were more involved in the actual investigation, where the Australian government was responsible for finding the plane. And so they spent 6 weeks with the Australian Maritime Safety Authority and the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, which is the equivalent of the US National Transport Bureau, you know, when a plane crashes or any big incident involving travel are involved. They did work with the Joint Task Force and other government and also academic agencies. So there also a lot of universities around the world offered resources on things like satellite or compute power or stuff to run simulations. So it was a very well coordinated in terms of the sheer scope of people involved. It involved a lot of moving parts. Yeah,
because obviously it's quite weird for a plane that size to just disappear.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. In May of 2014, so 2 months after the crash, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau established a working group to determine the most likely position of the aircraft at the 8:19 a.m. satellite transmission. This is a very important one that we are going to mention very detailed in a minute. So keep that in mind. You'll have more clarity on what the significance of that shortly. This included aircraft and satellite experts of the Air Accidents Investigation Branch in the UK, Boeing in the US, the company that made the plane, Defence Science and Technology Group, which is Australian Defence Force Technology Branch, the Department of Civil Aviation from Malaysia, Inmarsat, which is the UK satellite company, National Transport Safety Board from the US, and Thales, who are a French aeronautical specialist. They make a lot of onboard electronic equipment, so they have parts on these planes, and they were brought in as experts to look into any electrical things and things like that. As of October 2018, France is the only country still investigating, with the intention to verify all the data they have received from Inmarsat, the company that makes the satellite communication system for the plane. And speaking of satellites, now we get into the analysis, actually, of the satellite communications, because as I touched on briefly earlier, that is the only thing after the plane left Malaysian military radar at 2:22 a.m.
that was able to ping it.
It's the only thing they have.
Yeah. But just an interesting question. What did any other country that took part of this investigation, why did they give up after 2018? They concluded that the
cost, the time, the thing they've just concluded they're never going to find it.
Okay.
So, I mean, they already spent $155 million on it, as we discussed in part one. And, I mean, at some point, as horrible as it is for the family, I mean, it's also the ocean.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they don't know even exactly where the plane crashed. They have narrowed it down to a smaller area, but we're talking like 25,000 square kilometers. So, it's not that small.
And it's still the Indian Ocean. And
it's about 3,000 meters deep.
And it's constantly moving.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, it's not worth it anymore for them. Okay, so, communications between Malaysian Airways flight MH370 and the Inmarsat 3 F1 satellite operated by Inmarsat are the only significant clues to the location of the flight after disappearing from Malaysian military radar at 2:22 a.m., which was about an hour and 40 minutes after takeoff.
Mm-hmm.
So as we discussed in the last episode, the Malaysian military tracked an unidentified aircraft on their radar after air traffic control had already lost contact because of the difference in technologies of their radar tech. But again, listen to part one if you need to know more. The investigations team had the task of reconstructing the flight path of flight MH370, and from this limited set of transmissions, with no information, this is very important, these satellite points that they have no information about the aircraft's location, heading, or speed. And you're probably asking yourself, well, why don't they have this information?
Why don't they have this information, Alex? Please tell me.
I'll tell you why. Because the SATCOM, so planes have multiple satellite systems, right? So the satellite is part of a system called a SATCOM system.
Okay.
The satellite transmissions. They were sent by a system called the SATCOM system, and that's used to transmit messages from aircraft cockpits, such as automated data signals.
Yeah.
From onboard equipment on the plane to up to a satellite and then down to a ground station on, in this case, it was in Perth in Western Australia. And then from that ground, which is an Inmarsat owned facility. And then in that case, like, let's say if it was a message for Malaysian Airways HQ, they relay the message on and so on, like almost like an exchange point.
Okay.
The aircraft uses a satellite data unit, and this is the thing they have data from, which sends and receives signals via satellite and operates independently from the other systems that use the SATCOM. So, in other words, you can use the satellite to send messages or to send faxes, like if you need to send like a manifest or something for any reason while in the air. But this system specifically can also operate outside of that. You don't need those other functions to be enabled for this to work.
Okay.
And this is why they had no other information on like location, speed, or heading for the plane, because basically all the other instruments were not connected anymore. Only the satellite data unit was. And all that does is it pings the satellite once every hour. Yeah. And that gets relayed to the ground station.
So it goes from the ground up to the satellite goes up to the plane, satellite down.
Exactly. Correct. With no other information. It's basically just like, oh, hey, you still alive?
Yeah.
Like, yep. That's basically what it is. What happens is the signal gets sent from the satellite data unit and it's transmitted to the satellite, which amplifies the signal and changes its frequency. This is important. It then relays it to the ground station. In this case, it was in Perth in Australia. And from here, if applicable, it gets sent on to its destination. But what also happens is when the plane I guess you can call is first started, right? Like first turned on for the flight. This system automatically does like a login check, which they call a handshake. Okay. So when you start up the plane or like power on all the electronics, it logs on to the satellite network and basically like puts in a login request, which goes up to the satellite, that it goes down to the ground station. The ground station makes sure that that satellite data unit is actually a paying customer because it's a subscription-based service. So, and then that's it. Like, that's all it does. It just makes sure, and then the satellite sends back to them like, oh, yeah, cool, like, all good. Okay, you're logged in.
Okay.
And then once every hour from then on, as long as the plane is on and in the air, the ground station just sends a ping to the satellite, to the plane, to make sure that, like, oh, you're still logged in.
Okay.
Essentially is what happens. And this is called a handshake. And now we'll get into why the satellite is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we discussed in the last episode, the plane went dark disappeared from radar for air traffic control at the changeover between the Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, right?
Yeah.
At I think it was about 1:30 in the morning, about 45 minutes after takeoff.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, there were no more transmissions from any of the other systems, satellite systems, like at all.
Yeah.
Right? So in the investigation, they determined that somewhere between 1:07, which was the next 1 hour login ping from the satellite ground station, right? And 2:03 Malaysian time, because that's when the next one was scheduled to be pinged.
Okay.
But it didn't get a response.
Okay, so they were supposed to do this handshake sort of thing.
Yeah, it's automated. The plane does it automatically.
Okay.
It's, but they missed the one at 2:03. And also there was no other data being transmitted.
Hmm.
So obviously this is why there's the theory that someone has turned off, manually gone and switched off all of the satellite communications.
Okay.
So keep in mind, this is at 2:03 in the AM. It's missed the 1 hour check-in.
Hmm.
Then at 2:22, so what's that, 19 minutes after that check-in, the Malaysian military lose the flight off their radar.
Yeah.
So now begins the series of satellite data points that investigators have to work with after disappearing off the radar. So at the end of the radar, they know that the plane's on the other side of Malaysia, sort of heading southwest.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be going north. So it's going the complete wrong direction, as we've already established. So what actually happened is it missed the missed the login ping at 2:03, right?
Yeah.
At 2:25 and 27 seconds, so 22 minutes after it was expected, they got a new logon request.
Okay.
From the satellite. Then 14 minutes after that, at 2:39, the ground-to-aircraft telephone call was acknowledged by the satellite data unit. So the ground station had actually tried to call the plane by a satellite phone.
Okay.
It was unanswered. Then at 3:41, so this is an hour, 2 minutes after the attempted phone call, there was a second handshake sent by the ground station, just to make sure they're still logged in. That was successful. So no worries. So this is the second data point they have after it's left the radar space. So they have the first one at 2:25. They have this one now at 3:41 in the morning. They have another one at 4:41, another ping. Another one at 5:41. Another one at 6:41. Then at 7:13, the ground to aircraft telephone, they try to make another phone call to the unit, which is registered. Yeah. Again, unanswered. Then at 8:10, there was the sixth handshake, so the sixth sort of data point that they have. And at 8:19, there was the final ping, which it was only 9 minutes after the last one, right?
Yeah. But just a question.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this satellite system, it pings them and they sort of see a general where they sort of are.
No, it's not radar.
It's not radar.
They don't see where they are.
Okay, so
it's not radar. No. It's just communication.
Okay.
Just communication.
But wouldn't it be like in the same... I don't know. Wouldn't they think it's weird that they're still getting pings from that plane since it was... How long was the flight supposed to be?
5 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
This is This is 7.5 hours after takeoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have struck them as weird?
Of course it did. That's why they tried to call the plane. And remember, these are only the 2 phone calls that were made. These are the 2 that were logged as being successfully sent to the plane.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily, there could have been, obviously it's satellite, there could have been thick cloud cover in the area blocking other attempted calls and things like that.
Okay.
But back to the last point I said, so at 8:10, they had the 6th handshake, and then at 8:19, they had the last one, right, the final ping.
Yeah.
This is what widely called a partial handshake because what it was actually a new login. Like the system had actually logged out and then they logged back in.
Okay.
And that is very important. And it was acknowledged by the system. It was like, yep, okay, log on request, no problem. And this is the very important part. And the reasoning is this. So this is what they've deduced from the investigations. This is the stuff that they think within, with reasonable confidence is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So they know that the aircraft remained operational until at least 8:19. This is 7 hours, 37 minutes after takeoff.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, the plane only had that much fuel.
Yeah.
Remember, we had 2 hours above the estimated flight, just for safety reasons. Yeah. So they're right on the limit. But they know because it's had a log-on request and they've had consistent pings from 2:25 until 8:19.
They know that it's still up in the air.
Yep. They know that. Yeah. So they know it was flying. It didn't crash before then. What they also notice is there's these things called burst frequency offset. So if you remember what I said, that the plane sends a signal and then the satellite gets it and then adjusts the frequency a bit and then sends it down to the ground station. That's to adjust for speed.
Okay.
So it's for the Doppler effect, basically. Which is like, if you're moving and a target's also moving, because, the satellite's moving, the plane's moving,
yeah,
Earth is also rotating. So they need to adjust the signals so that they make sure they can... And that's sort of how they kind of located it. Although there is no locational data in the signal. They could work out by how long it took from, it went to the ground station here, the satellite got it there at this precise time, and the plane received it then. So we know that they're approximately going this fast, and they're approximately in this area, and that's where they made these 7 rings. If you've seen the investigation for the estimated points of where the plane could be, there's 7 concentric circles which go out from the last radar point from the Malaysian military, and that is based on these logins and these pings, because they worked out approximately from that radar point, the first handshake was, X minutes later. So they have to be somewhere, but we don't know what direction they're going. So it's a full circle around. And then at the second handshake, they did more. So, the circles go out from that radar point. And then obviously they worked out, well, the plane couldn't have gone north over, India and into Europe because people would have seen it. And other, militaries would have noticed a plane that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, the military or anyone would have catched up. They would have noticed it on their radar.
Exactly. So it could have only gone south over the Indian Ocean, basically. And that's how they sort of started narrowing down the search area. They used the time difference between the satellite pings and the changes in the frequency to work out approximately, not perfect, but where the plane must have been.
Yeah.
From this, they know that the plane was moving at speed, so it didn't have an issue. It wasn't just gliding or anything. It was moving pretty consistent with a usual cruise speed.
Yeah.
The satellite data unit needs location and track info to keep its antenna pointed to the satellite. So this, like I said, when they first log on, it matched to a specific satellite. I think it was the INSAR 3-F1, I think it was. And so they know that the pilots or the plane itself must have had some locational data like available to it. Those systems must have still been working.
Okay.
Not necessarily ones that send their information by a satellite, but ones on the plane itself. So they must have known how fast they were going, what altitude, because the satellite data unit needs that information to adjust to point to the satellite.
Yeah.
They assumed that the aircraft's navigation system was operational until it crashed. The aircraft did not respond to a ping at 9:15 in the morning. So they know that somewhere between the 8:19 and 9:15, the plane has crashed.
Yeah.
Which is consistent with the fuel on board and all of that. The communication at 8:19 was a login request, as we said before, which is weird because usually once a plane logs on, until the flight is finished, they do not ever log off and log back in. It's very unusual behavior. It can occur, and it usually only occurs after one of the following: a power interruption, software failure, or a loss of critical systems. Basically crash imminent. Planes disintegrating, sort of thing.
But that is not something you can do manually.
No, it is. They power interruption.
The power interruption. Okay, yeah.
They basically are very, very confident that someone turned it off when they switched from Malaysian airspace into Vietnamese. When they disappeared from air traffic control, someone deliberately went and turned off the system.
Yeah.
And then, just probably by pure coincidence, but basically after they left military radar at 2:22, remember there was a new login request at 2:25 in the morning.
Yeah. So
that was someone turning the system back on.
Okay, yeah.
Or either someone or the system doing it itself. Not entirely sure, obviously, because we don't know what happened. But that was also a new login request. That was someone, they logged out when someone turned off the power, and then either someone turned it back on or the plane somehow did it itself.
Yeah.
But yes, it was almost certainly human intervention.
Yeah.
At 8:19, the plane had been flying for 7 hours and 38 minutes. As we said, the normal flight time was 5 hours 30. So fuel exhaustion was very likely. So, out of fuel. In the event of fuel exhaustion, planes have a thing called a ram air turbine that deploys. It's like a little electric spinning motor.
Okay.
That spins with as they're moving through the air to keep power to very critical instruments.
Yeah.
Such as the satellite data unit. So the dots will connect in a second.
Okay.
As we said, right, they had the 6th handshake, was it, I think 8:10 or 8:15 in the morning? And then they had the final one at 8:19.
Yeah, 8:10 and 8:19.
So the biggest theory here is that at 8:19 is when the plane ran out of fuel.
Yeah.
And then it deployed the ram air turbine to spin up, which turned the satellite data unit back on, which is why they got that final login ping.
Okay.
So that is the main theory here, is that at 8:19, that's when the plane, you're out of fuel. The turbine gets deployed by the plane automatically, spins up to bring just auxiliary power, basic power to the very critical instruments.
Yeah.
Satellite data unit logs back in, and that's the last that they ever heard from the plane. Now, to analyze this data, so, there's not that much really when we think about it. They have, 7 data points basically to work with.
Yeah.
After a lost military contact.
And they don't know anything about speed.
Exactly. Nothing to do with speed, the heading it was going, the altitude it was at. So what they did is they factored in the type of aircraft. This is the investigators. They factored in the type of aircraft, the satellite itself, like the way, the speed it was moving at and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
The speed and heading of sort of the data points that they had sort of worked out where the plane would most likely be.
Yeah.
And then they combined that with the aircraft performance constraints. So things like the fuel load that that particular flight had.
Yeah.
And then they did a combination of possible speeds and altitudes And that's sort of how they worked out the approximate sort of path using the satellite data points. And, if the plane was going this fast at this altitude, and we know it ran out of fuel approximately, at this point in time. So it's probably going this way.
Yeah.
And they developed two methods of testing. One was built, they had two sort of tracks that they were testing. One was built on the assumption that the plane would be using one of the 3 autopilot modes.
Hmm.
So they assumed it would be using one of the 3 autopilot modes. They used that, like I said just before, the burst frequencies, so the difference in radio frequency from the satellite communication frequency, to sort of work out possible routes that the plane could have taken and use again, and then cross-referencing them with sort of values like timestamps from the ground station they could work out. And because it was an autopilot, and there's 3 modes, they could pretty comfortably know like roughly what speed the plane's going, roughly what altitude, because it's an automated system.
But they're assuming that it was autopilot.
Yes. In this case. And then they have the second case, which generated paths which the plane's speed and heading were adjusted based on the time of each handshake to minimize any like errors in their calculations, I guess you could call it, for the difference in frequency to help them work out how to geolocate the plane.
Yeah.
And what they then created is they created like a probability of distribution. So they with certain confidence, we think the plane was going like that direction. And I think the best they came out, they got with about 80% confidence in this model. And that was ultimately the sort of search area that they identified in the end.
Yeah, but on this second model, do they also assume that it was on autopilot or? No.
This is with human flying the plane. They basically use that to determine, but then they did a bunch of cross-referencing and things, and they determined, a probability distribution, like, it's 2% chance it's going to be going over India, so we rule that out. It's not going there. And then that's how they found the sort of the search area. And it sort of backed up the search area that they thought as well. And that's how they started narrowing down, because originally the search area was 4.6 million square kilometers. Now they think it was somewhere within about 25,000 square kilometers. So they've really narrowed it down using that. And now for the possible in-flight events. So this is, again, from the experts. This isn't people on the internet. This is from actual investigations and, published reports.
Yeah.
What has been thought or possibly could have happened. So they know that the satellite communications function properly pre-flight. So they were first turned on at exactly midnight. The flight took off at 12:42. So, 42 minutes before the flight. And they know that it worked fine until the last acknowledged message at 1:07, when it was still on air traffic control, and everything was going normal.
Because that's when they were signing out.
Yeah, that was the last sort of automatic, like, normal ping.
Yeah.
When it was still on radar and everything was going smooth.
Wasn't that when they were handing over to the Vietnamese airspace?
Just before. This was about 12 minutes before they did the handover. They know that the ground system, so the ground station, sent a request for acknowledgement multiple times between 1:07 and 2:03. So remember, 2:03 was the next scheduled handshake that they missed, which was when just after they went dark and went unanswered. But they sent multiple. They didn't just send one time. Just to clarify that for everybody, they sent multiple requests, and they all went unanswered. So, of course, somewhere between 1:07 and 2:03, the power to the satellite data unit was lost. Well, most likely because someone physically turned it off.
Yeah.
At 2:25, they know that they received a new logon request. So someone or somehow the satellite data unit has powered back up. Again, uncommon to happen, but can happen for a few reasons that we've already discussed, like power outage. And again, that's almost certainly what happened. Someone turned it off and then back on once they'd gone off their track far enough. Analysis suggests that the power was lost most likely due to manual powering down because there was no evidence of an engine flame out, which is like when it runs out of fuel or the engine failing, because they know that the plane was in the air for another 5 hours at least, or almost 6 hours after disappearing from military radar. So obviously the engines worked. So it basically had to be. And that's why they're basically certain it was a person that did it. Another possible explanation here is an unresponsive crew or hypoxia.
Okay.
So an analysis by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau considered 3 accident categories. Like an in-flight incident, like an engine stalled. Well, we know that didn't happen because the plane flew for another 6 hours, right? A glide event. Again, run out of fuel, engine failure. We know that it's not that. Or an unresponsive crew or hypoxia event. So
what is that?
Hypoxia event is, so obviously we know a plane is compressed, right? It's pressurized because, you're flying at an altitude where humans can't normally breathe without assistance from oxygen systems.
Yeah.
So they pressurize the plane to get it closer to sea level so that you can breathe, so the air's dense enough to breathe.
Yeah, they pressurize the plane.
Exactly. But if the plane had depressurized and lost oxygen, you would become unconscious at the altitudes that planes cruise at.
Okay.
And so in this event, let's say if the oxygen system had been turned off for some reason, or the oxygen mask didn't deploy for passengers, you would get knocked out because obviously you're being oxygen starved, so you would just pass out and eventually die. So they thought that is a possible explanation, that maybe someone has tampered with the flight or with the plane and the safety systems and basically knocked everyone else out and took control of the plane.
Just out of curiosity, to pressurize the plane, is that something they manually have to do? Or is it a systematic that kicks in at a certain altitude?
No idea. I assume it's automatic, but...
Alex, I thought you knew everything about planes.
I don't, unfortunately. Look, I mean, I assume that it's, an automated system would make sense, but maybe not. I'm not sure. So yeah, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau think, that's definitely a possible explanation, and also could explain how someone could get away with it. I guess when you have 12 crew on board and 2 pilots, but if they've done something to one of the pilots, took out the other pilot, and then cut off the oxygen supply or depressurized where the passengers are.
Yeah, but you also have to consider, I'm thinking more human psychology here. You have a very experienced pilot and a rookie, basically, who's on his last, he still has his training wheels on.
Yeah.
So the experienced pilot could have easily manipulated the co-pilot.
Yeah, or I mean, even maybe the other way around. We don't know.
I doubt it.
You doubt it, but we'll talk about that next episode. We'll really jump into our thoughts, I guess.
Sorry.
But so this, in a case like this would support the sort of models they built where autopilot was on.
Yeah.
If all the crew, or even let's say if the pilot, let's say if it was a pilot who decided, fuck it, I've had enough, I'm going to crash today.
Yeah.
But, he probably doesn't want to be involved in a crash, right?
Yeah.
So you depressure, you put on the autopilot, or you go dark, you turn off your course, you go to the middle of the ocean. Then you put on the autopilot, you depressurize, so you basically pass out, don't feel anything, and then the plane just kind of travels off into the distance until it runs out of fuel by itself.
Yeah.
It's pretty plausible. But again, within experts, there's no consensus of how this would have happened.
Yeah.
There's different theories, and some people don't even think it happened at all. Some people think it almost certainly happened, but how did it happen? No one. Obviously, we don't know. No one ever found it. But that is another explanation. The crew got knocked out, and passengers and all of that, and the plane just cruised on autopilot till it ran out of fuel.
Yeah.
Obviously, at some point, some human, probably one of the pilots, obviously
did something.
Yeah, did something to take it off course, and probably had enough of this world and decided.
Well, I watched some videos with about this whole incident, and obviously you have people say different things, and everyone has their theories. You have your experts, you have people that were actually part of the task team that were talking. And most of the consensus, most people think that it was autopilot, and eventually it just ran out of fuel and it crashed.
Yeah.
but a lot of expert pilots that weren't part of the investigation, like other really experienced pilots, they're like, no way. Like, there's no way it depressurized and it was on autopilot. But by the way, he did the movement, like going in and out, because he went back to Penang. Was it Penang?
Penang, yeah.
His hometown. And I think in one of the satellites, they can actually tell how the plane moved. So sort of like looking out of the window for him.
We touched that on in episode 1. That the initial turn was too steep for an autopilot.
Yeah. And then, but then also how he kept moving in and out to not get detected by either Malaysia or Thailand.
Yeah.
Like military forces, because he must have just been on the brink of both of them going in and out.
Yeah, they crossed over near the border between Thailand and Malaysia. So there is possible. And
it wasn't enough, like the plane wasn't in the radar enough time for them to pick up the signal, like, oh, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, they basically just have like there's something there.
Yeah, but not enough to alert them in the sense.
Yeah.
But also like the way the plane crashed, and also, like I say, like these are more the conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
But they also consent that the rescue team that like they gathered the satellite points and they narrowed it down to a certain specific place in the ocean.
Yeah.
They don't think it's there. They have other places that they're like, this is where it is.
Yeah.
And one of the pilots is like, I bet my life on it. Like, it is there, but they won't look there. Because let's say if it would have been autopilot and the plane would have just crashed, just ran out of fuel and just plummeted down into the ocean with that speed, like there would have not been any plane left.
We'll go there next episode. You're jumping ahead.
I know, but it's so fucked up.
Yeah, well,
okay. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, we're almost at the end. So talking of autopilot, this is what some of the investigations think.
Okay.
We discussed again in part 1 that they found a flaperon on a beach in, I believe it was in Reunion or in Mozambique.
Reunion.
I think it was Reunion. And a flaperon is one of the things on the wing that they adjust when they want to like change altitude or slow down and things like that when they hit the ground. Analysis of that showed that the landing flaps were not extended, which supports the theory that there was no manual control inputs from a pilot if the plane had run out of fuel. Because if the plane had run out of fuel, more like, some people thought that the plane just like ran out of fuel and then the pilot sort of glided it until it hit the water. No. Because if the flap wasn't extended, what would have happened the second the autopilot runs out, the plane almost immediately would have gone into a spiral nosedive straight down into the ocean.
Yeah.
Within 20 nautical miles of where it ran out of fuel. So basically, like, almost straight down.
Yeah.
Using that physical piece of evidence, they've sort of determined that it's very unlikely that there was any human input whatsoever when it hit the water. It was just spinning out of control.
Okay.
But so that backs up the autopilot theory.
Yeah, but I've also heard a theory about that flapper, that the way, because it was so intact when they find it, there is no way that it would have been in an autopilot mood, that when it just would have lost control, that the flapper wouldn't have been in that.
Flapperon.
Yeah, the flapperon, the fucking flapper. It wouldn't have stayed that intact because at that speed that it would have crashed against the ocean surface, it would have, like, the whole plane would have basically blown up. So, but the piece is so intact.
But how would it blow up? There's no fuel on board.
No, but
to ignite.
I don't mean blow up.
Disintegrate.
It just disintegrate there because of the hitting the surface of the ocean.
Hey, this is all good stuff for next week. So
yeah. But I'm just saying, you brought up the thing, and I'm just saying that is my opinion.
But that's why I find this so interesting, because this is from official investigations, but then you also have very knowledgeable people that say complete opposite things that we're going to delve into on the next episode. Which is, I think, why this was so interesting to me. And just sort of to round this one out, so of course they also looked into passenger involvement, as we said before. They found the 2 guys with stolen passports, nothing sus. They did background checks on every single person on board, pilots, staff, and passengers. Nothing out of the ordinary. They researched into the backgrounds of a lot of all the staff to look at, like, for example, were there any irregular financial transactions, or was their body behavior any different on the way, like in the airport? Nothing out of the ordinary. Again, next week we'll dive into some other things that maybe are contrary to this that you've briefly touched on, like, secret lovers and things like that. And also in part 1 we touched on like a flight simulator. That's also very important in some of the sort of other theories out there. But for now, in this scope, we're saying their sort of official line is there was nothing out of the ordinary from anyone on the plane.
Yeah.
Like that was detectable by them from the outside. Obviously something happened, but...
Yeah. Really? Yeah. You reckon?
Yeah. And last but not least is there are also questions about the cargo. Like, could something have on board have happened? But there was nothing... They had about 2.5 tons of lithium-ion batteries, which, if are stored incorrectly, can short-circuit and explode.
Yeah.
But obviously, as the plane flew, basically till it
ran out
of all of its fuel, there's no way that it was on fire the whole time. So very unlikely that was the cause. There was also almost 4.6 tons of these things I've never seen before called mangosteens.
What?
They're a fruit from an evergreen tropical tree that grows in like Southeast Asia, like Thailand and Indonesia.
Okay. And
they were en route. They're a very popular food, and they were on the plane. They were en route to China.
Yeah.
Like to be exported. And they didn't do a check of all. They came in 4 big containers, so like just over a ton per container of these mangosteens. They didn't really do a full thorough inspection of anything.
Oh, in the actual
in the cargo, like when they received it to put on the plane. But because it was packaged in accordance with all the rules and regulations, they don't have to. Mm-hmm. But again, it's very unlikely. Like, for example, was someone smuggled on board through the cargo or something? Yeah, they think it's very unlikely, very, very unlikely that happened. Mm. So again, they don't think anything untoward with the cargo really either. It had to be someone that was already on that plane.
Mm. And nothing stuck out from any of
nothing stuck out. Yeah. So the investigation really, I mean,
they found fuck all.
They found fuck all. Yeah. Well, I mean, all they had was 7 handshakes, like satellite data points, plus the last known military radar point. And I mean, that's it. So the investigation is it's interesting how they worked out sort of search areas using those satellite points, but it's also kind of concerning that that's such little information that they have. Yeah. But this has brought about a bunch of safety regulations. So some changes we'll very quickly mention before we sign off. The flight data recorders have like a beacon that has to have a 30-day battery life that pulses so that they can locate it. Yeah. By law now, they're on, I think, every new plane, not necessarily old ones, they have to have 90 days of battery life.
Okay.
So, because obviously one of the biggest concerns in this case is it crashed in the middle of the ocean. It took like a week or something just to get there. Yeah. And then it's the ocean, like within 30 days, chance of finding it's nothing because the range is also very small. I think the beacon is only detectable from about 3,000 meters away. So if that's on the bottom of the ocean floor, you basically have to be on top of it to be able to detect it. They also are making now every new plane made can eject the flight recorders if it crashes in water. So I don't know how they've done it, but I think it's just if it was over the last known location to the computer knows it's over a water body, they eject with a flotation device and they eject the data recorder so they will always stay on top of the water. Okay. But that's, again, not being retrofitted to old planes. It's only going to be planes made from 2020 onwards, brand new ones. They're not putting it on. But
this happened in 2014. Yeah. Why the fuck did you just start in 2020?
Well, I mean, you got to build... I mean, they got to make prototypes. They got to... it's aviation. You got to approve it. You got to go through regulatory bodies. It takes a while.
True, but still.
Yeah. And there was... I can't remember. There was a couple other things, but they're not of that.
If you want to know, just fucking Google it.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing sort of major. There was more of those things like safety features like that. Oh, sorry, no, there was one other one. Flight recorders, even if they got it, they only record the last 2 hours of data. So obviously if the plane went dark an hour after takeoff, but then flew for another 6.5 hours, they're going to be missing that critical time, like what happened.
Yeah.
There's no audio of what happened between when it disappeared from air traffic control and when it appeared within the new login request on the complete other side of Malaysia and going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
They would have had no records. So now all flight recorders record 25 hours of audio.
Oh, okay.
So,
but wouldn't they, like, I know this might sound like easy to just say in a sense, but in a way catalog it, but have it constantly streaming up to a cloud sort of?
No, they're doing that as well.
Yeah.
They're developing a lot of like compression, like streaming tech, but obviously the thing there is, you're over the ocean, so you're using satellite, which is not, if you're in like thick cloud.
Yeah, true.
It's difficult. But yeah, that is also a thing that's being introduced, is like data streaming.
Mm.
So yeah, like they are, at least to this, some good came of it. They're trying to make things a bit safer for us. Oh, well, not really. It's like, it's only safer if you crash.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even safer. It's just, okay, I guess the flight recorder is safer because you can learn from what happened by knowing what happened.
So
but
basically,
it's not safer for you on the plane.
No.
Because you've already crashed. You're probably dead.
So in other words, it's just if you get fucked by a kamikaze pilot, the next person might be safer.
Yeah, the next time they might know the computer or something might be a bit smarter and be able to like override or something.
Mm.
But yeah, that's all the investigation. As you can see, like it's a lot of conjecture and maybe this, maybe that, because they just don't know. And that's why I found it so interesting. And then, like I said, next week we'll get into the more, like, some of the things you brought up that are, like, contradictory to what's been presented in this episode.
Yeah.
Or that build upon it with more extreme ideas and mentalities. And I know that Andy, our spiritual leader, is going to be joining us again next week, hopefully. He has his own theory, of course, that he's coming with. Yeah, he wanted to do it today, but because he was sick, so... he'll bring it to us next week, live, hopefully, on air. Yeah.
I don't know. I just find it mind-boggling how a plane with how many passengers? Almost 300?
230 or 229 or something.
Yeah. Can just disappear out of the face of the earth. Yep. And it should be of great concern to a lot of people because it is scary in a sense. Like, flying as it is terrifying in a sense.
It's the safest form of long distance travel though.
Yeah, but still, like, you're just putting your faith in a can that's just going out like almost into space and just like,
if you're scared of that, never watch how they're made.
I know,
because then you'll be even scared when you realize how little material is between you and the fucking being sucked outside.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing, is like it is. I find it scary. Like, I've flown many, many, many times in my life and done long distance. Like,
I know.
My family's from Chile, so as a kid, we would fly
Sweden to Chile.
Sweden to Chile,
24 hours.
Yeah. So, and also I met this dickhead and I had to fly to Australia a couple of times. So you get used to it, but at the same time, like some part of your back head is like, you can die at any second, and just having this sort of information that shit like this happens is like, doesn't reassure you.
The most important thing you need to remember when flying is don't sit at the front. It's the most dangerous part of the plane to be.
Just sit in the middle. It's the scariest, but it's still the safest.
Being over the wings is the safest point, or behind the wings. Never sit in front of the wings, people. It's the most dangerous. If the plane does go down, that's usually the part that just goes up instantly in flames.
Yeah.
Because you have a chance, at least if you're behind the wings, that the plane will snap in the middle and you get thrown to safety and you avoid the fireball of all the fire. That's basically the why. And that's been proven in history. There was a plane crash in Japan with 500 people on it and 3 people survived, and because they're all sitting in the back, and the tail of the plane snapped off and got thrown hundreds of meters away, so it avoided the fireball.
Yeah.
So yeah, sit in the back.
I just have to say something that you won't hear a lot. I'm kind of grateful for Corona right now. So at least next time we'll fly, like, it'll be some time between this episode and me having to think about this, because if you say we were to fly to Australia like next week or next month, I would still have this fresh in my head and like, fuck. But
that's fine.
Since Corona is here, we can't fly anywhere. Yay.
You know, death will find you no matter what.
Yeah.
Maybe not on a plane, it'll find you by bus when you're crossing the street or something.
Yeah,
brain aneurysm.
Just walking down the fucking road since I haven't plowed, and I fall to my death with all this ice and snow we have at the moment.
Yep, but okay, this has been going on for a while, so let's wrap this one up.
Yeah.
You can find us on Instagram.
Yeah, come follow us there. We should be more active there, but still, come give us a follow. That is @random.podcast. So at.random.podcast.
And on Twitter, you can find us at @AT_randompod. And the best thing you can do is, if you like what you hear, share it with people. That is the best. Send it to your friends, recommend it on forums or on social media. That's the best thing you can do. And of course, as always, we have a Discord server if you'd like to join. Discord is no link. We're going to explain what it is first.
Why?
Discord is maybe people don't know what Discord is. Discord is a service that you can use to like voice chat. You have channels, you can do text, you can join us and watch us live on camera when we record. It's great for having a little community, so feel free to jump on and join us, and maybe next week you can catch the spiritual leader. We record at about 8 p.m. every Sunday night, Central European time, so whatever that is for you, come and join us.
Link in the description down below.
Yeah, and on that note, we'll catch you next week for the final wrap-up in the tinfoil hat theories.
Yeah.
So bring your favorite Alex Jones outfit and come for a ride.
I'm so looking forward to next week's episode.
Yeah. All right.
Bye.